Welcome to another edition of Late to the Party with Mayim, where I review movies that pretty much everyone has seen, but I missed out on. Today's review is of a very, very famous movie. Some people say it's one of the greatest movies of all time. The movie is Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Can you believe I've never seen this movie? I know! I bet you're curious what I thought of it 25 years after it came out. Was it 25 years?
I feel like it was more.
It's gotta be more. Can you look it up real quick?
Yeah. Siri, when did Raiders of the Lost Ark come out?
Raiders of the Lost Ark was released June 12, 1981.
Oy. I bet you're curious what I thought of this movie 35 years after it came out. Well, here's my one-line review. I like this movie a lot. Why? Number 1, young Harrison Ford. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a pretty big fan of older Harrison Ford, and even approaching geriatric Harrison Ford. He's 74. But there's something about this young Harrison Ford that is pleasing not only to the eye, but also to the brain. He's hunky, but he's also brilliant. He spends most of the movie with a shirt open to his waist, and he's all like sweaty and swarthy, and he's got stubble going on, beating people up, but he's also a professor. And he's not like dopey hunky. He's like hunky and making smart, snarky jokes. He's like your older brother's best friend who you always had a crush on, but who treated you like the kid's sister, but it didn't matter because he was just so awesome. And sometimes he messes things up, but then he's like clever about fixing them. He's a great hero, and he's hunky, and he's snarky. Number 2. This movie has a very compelling plotline. It focuses around the adventures of an archaeologist, Professor Indiana Jones, who specializes in Egyptology in 1936. By day, he's a spectacle and three-piece suit-wearing professor. But when an ancient artifact, which can potentially find the location of the Lost Ark of the Covenant, is being hunted by the Nazis, Professor Jones is called in to try to get the artifact before the Nazis do. Time to take that three-piece suit off and open your shirt up to the waist. The daughter of Indiana Jones's academic rival, who he used to be in love with, becomes a pawn in the Nazis' game to keep the artifact. And Indy gets called in to save the day after many outrageous and awesome fight scenes, and he also gets to keep the girl, and everybody's happy in the end. It's got history, romance, adventure, psychopathic Nazis. What more could you ask for? Number 3. The third thing I loved about this movie is the nostalgia factor. This movie was made 35 years ago by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. At the time it came out, it was one of the most visually fantastic movies anyone had ever seen. But the special effects are dated and kind of laughable. And it made me nostalgic for a time when life was simpler and fuzzy lines around characters because they're standing in front of a green screen was considered amazing. And if you choose to let small people watch this, they may report, as my children did, that they weren't that scared or freaked out by the violence or gore in this movie. Because in the words of my 8-year-old, it just didn't look that real. The film was not flawless, and in particular, the female character was painted with some pretty broad strokes. In some cases, she's a really cool female lead, deciding her own destiny, owning her own business, wearing men's clothing before it was considered hip, and defending herself physically when she's threatened. But in many cases, the screenplay is unclear how to best use her as a heroine, and she ends up being a damsel in distress for most of the film. But hey, considering the last film I reviewed was The Little Mermaid, at least this leading lady can speak. Tune in next time when I review yet another movie that people can't believe I've never seen. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel.